Thank you for joining me, Delta Sigma, part of the RBeats radio and global media streaming network experience. Welcome to this edition of We Talk Raw, where real conversations meet unreal creativity. Today, dream maker Terry Hudson sits down with a true creative rebel, Steve Taylor. This Grammy-nominated rock pioneer has crashed the walls of Christian music, and now produces worlds on screen that challenge, inspire, and imagine. From Shaggle Guevara's cult anthem, Tail O, the Twister, in Pump Up the Volume, to producing the unforgettable Kiss Me music video for Sixpence None the Richer, Steve's creativity has never stayed in one lane. From the cult classic, Blue Like Jazz, to the 2025 fantasy phenomenon Sketch, written and directed by Seth Worley and brought to life by stars Tony Hale and Darcy Carden, Taylor's career has been a masterclass in the arts and cultural moves. So buckle up, let's take this ride together, as we enjoy speaking on how the storytelling begins in the life of Steve Taylor. Faith, film, and fearless. Right now, on We Talk Raw, hosted by Terry Hudson, powered by RBeats Radio Global Media and Streaming Network.
And welcome to the RBeats studio. This is Terry Hudson, and aka Dreammaker. Everybody knows that I'm called Dreammaker now. I consider myself more of a dream facilitator. But I got to tell you, the guest that I have today on this show, one of the things that I always tell people, when they found out I used to be an artist manager, they say, were you like a shark? Shark in a suit like an artist manager? I say, no, I was a velociraptor. I looked for the holes in the fence and, maneuvered through that. But nobody is more of a king velociraptor than the person I have on today. Steve Taylor is a rock CCM icon. He is a music producer, producing, well-known hits. One of them that was the hit of the year at one time. And he's also been involved in music video production, and he's now a film producer, which I just found out that part about him recently. But Steve, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Terry. What a nice introduction.
Well, dude, I have been following your stuff a long time. I'm not going to date anybody here, but it's been a while. and so in that, you just, back in the day when I was first getting into music, I started in Christian music, even though the show now, we interview so many different genres, and it ranges from people that work with Motley Crue to, Christian artists to operatic, and jazz artists. So it's definitely a wide range. But in that, when I was first getting into CCM, you were like king of the world. You had the limelight thing going. I think you were the first Christian artist that I saw played on MTV, if I remember. So let's just start there. You came out with I Want to Be a Clone, and we'll get to that. But let's start with Meltdown. So
right.
Tell everybody about the video and about how all that took place.
Yeah, it was the title track of my first full-length album, and the record label was curious about what would it take to make a music video, because MTV was relatively new and music videos were just starting to become a thing. And I had actually studied film as a minor at Colorado University at Boulder. It was all avant-garde filmmaking. So that didn't prepare me really on how to make narrative features, but it did help with making music videos because they don't have to make any sense. And in the case of this song, the conceit of the song is that somebody turns up the heat at Madame Tussauds Wax Museum in London, and all these famous figures start melting. So I found the Hollywood Wax Museum on Hollywood Boulevard. Their day off was like Monday, I think. And I met the curator, and he was like a budding special effects guy. And I just made a deal with him to kind of take over the museum for a day. And we shot the music video at this Hollywood Wax Museum. And he created special effects, so it looked like different characters were melting. And it should not have gone as well as it did, but sometimes these things turn out. And so that was my first music video.
Yeah, it was very cool. Plus, back in that days, there was this iconic show that everybody knows now, Facts of Life, and you got the star of that, Lisa Whelchel, to actually be the newscaster in the video, which, that helped a lot as far as recognition.
Yes.
So in that whole thing, let's go back to the beginnings a little bit, because I know it wasn't this simple. I'm just going with the lore of things right now. The lore is, you're this preacher son, you're a youth minister. I've heard you in interviews back in the 80s, you would say, people are paying more attention to musicians now than they were sports people in the church. They would always bring in ex-NFL players or whatever. And now, you saw they were bringing in musicians. So you went this way, but your immediate lyrics were pretty heavily strong, for a brand new guy coming into this. So you're performing in Denver, I think it was. Is it back when they did the seminar in the Rockies? Is that
That's
part
right.
of the GMA?
Estes Park, Colorado. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Billy Ray Hearn gives you a recording deal. Okay, well, I'm going to be an artist and now have a recording deal. It seemed like it was pretty quick. Is that really the way it went?
It really was that fast. It was my first time to perform live. I put a band together. They gave me a 2-song slot at Estes Park. The response was really good. And Billy Ray Hearn was in the audience, and he literally met me as I was walking off the stage and said, "I want to do a record deal with you." So that,
okay.
It doesn't normally work this way, but that
I was like, for all these aspiring artists that watch us, and I always say, look, this is a longevity thing. Really how it happens, evidently, is you do your first concert, and the head of the record company is sitting in the audience, and he signs you as soon as you walk off stage. So that's pretty much the way it happens now. But in that, Billy Ray Hearn, for that guy to see you, for those that don't know him, Sparrow Records was genius when it came to the Christian music world. He had a lot of alignment with the Recording Academy, and before I think it was NARAS back then, and he was very involved in the Grammy system and the block parties and things like that in Nashville for their chapter. But he understood music marketing, and you guys, instead of looking like everybody else, you had these great blue cassette shells.
Right.
Yes. It stuck out on the shelf, though, didn't it? I mean, no matter what the artist was, it stuck out on the shelf. Like, you knew these guys, and you went in, and it helped you pick out something immediately instead of, because back then, to me, that was the heyday of my favorite part of Christian music, because it was a renaissance. I grew up in a church where we didn't listen to secular music, general market.
Right.
And so when I started doing that, I was able to find some great artists. There were so many innovative ones back then, the Rez Band, and that was when Stryper was starting to come up. And of course, the Imperials were in a different segment of what they were doing. And of course, you were the first real new wave that was non-corporate rock, I guess, and you stuck out like really fast.
Yeah. It was part of it was, I think the lyrics were very satirical and used a lot of sarcasm, calling out hypocrisy, and so that combined with kind of the new wave and punk rock influences, for better or worse, I definitely stuck out.
Well, let's talk about that, because that was what stuck out for me. Because to me, in the '80s, it was you and Bono. I just pictured you guys to just sit around and be writing all the time. With you, where everybody else was singing about the streets of gold and what we were going to do in heaven and, bringing in the sheaves and whatever it was, you were writing about the problems in the church. You were calling out universities. You were calling out Jimmy Swaggart. You were, who was not a fan of yours either, as you remember.
Right.
And you were even calling out, psychiatrists, and you, which is one of my favorite things you've ever done, is Young and the Restless. We'll get to that in a little bit. But then you roll into the On the Fritz album. So can you tell us how did that take place so early? Like, what ignited that style in you? Because it was definitely different than anybody doing anything at the time.
Yeah, I think part of it was just my dad was a pastor. I grew up in a fairly conservative church, and then I went to a really radical university near my home, Colorado University in Boulder, because I grew up in Denver. And there was just such a shockwave of kind of dissonance between how I'd grown up in this radical university, and I had to figure out some way to navigate that. And then punk rock and new wave started coming over from England at the same time. And it was just kind of the right mix. I was a youth pastor as well. I wanted to find ways to communicate what I thought, what believe is ultimate truth in my Christian beliefs, but I wanted to do them in a way that felt, confrontative, I guess, in some ways, and didn't shy away from problems both in the church and in the broader world. And so satire seemed like a good way to do it, and punk rock and new wave seemed like a good music to do it with.
Oh yeah, you were a true artist for sure. I mean, that's why you got accepted. Like we talked about Greenbelt, with the Limelight video. I mean, there you are in front of tens of thousands of people, so that was good for the world to see that you got this Christian artist on stage at something like this. And for me, it was the lyrics. Like I said, watching you, I wanted a similar path. I see where I went wrong. You went to a radical university. What I did is I got scholarships to different universities, and I went to a very sedate Christian school where it seemed like everything was wrong. And so,
wow.
After listening to your stuff, I go there. So now I'll see what the problem was. In fact, one of the things that I was known for, that they put me on 4-year probation my first year for a few things.
4-year probation?
Yeah,
That's a
my
long
first
probation.
my
That's
first
like a
year.
jail sentence.
Well, they just didn't know what to do. But it was just there were all these rules, and so I did come out of a conservative. My dad was a preacher and very conservative in a lot of the beliefs.
Yeah.
We had movies about how the rapture was going to take place, and we were all going to be struck by lightning, and whatever else we were seeing that all the time in youth groups. So then I go to this school, and they're very, very conservative, and you couldn't go to concerts and any secular concert, not Chicago, not Toto, not anything. And I had to sneak out to go to Stryper, stuff like that.
Wow.
And then they said you cannot go to movies. So one night I took everybody to the movies, and I took the tickets and I glued them to the president of the college's door, like I was Martin Luther or something. I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but
what was the movie?
I don't even remember. It was nothing like super bad. Definitely not the movie Super Bad. That was much later. But it was it was just one of those things that I felt the need to do, I guess. And so years later, I know the president of the college really well now, and he was asking at one of our reunions who did that, and the whole class, the whole class of that year pointed at me. So he grabbed me in a headlock in front of everybody.
You got outed all those years later.
All those years later. But, I had grown up a fairly good kid by that point, so there was no need for further probation. So let's go to the On the Fritz album.
Terry, I got to know what gave you the 4-year probation in the first place. Are you at liberty to say that?
I wasn't at Liberty. That was a different school. Anyway.
Oh.
Dad humor for my kids. But anyway, I was in the I got to do this fast because I can't cut into your time. There's so much greatness to you. But I was in the cafeteria. The president of the college came in, and my girlfriend at the time tapped me on my leg, said, "Hey, I need to tell you something." So I tapped her back. What do you need to tell me? He saw it, came up to me in front of everybody, and this is going to make me look really bad, but he said, "I better not ever see you touch a woman's leg like that again at this college." So I stood up on the cafeteria table, and I said, "I want to see you in your office right now." So I go in, and he has all these people sitting there in the disciplinary committee. I didn't know that. I go in. I step up on the chair in front of his desk. I lean down. I look at him. I said, "I don't know who you think you are. Are you the president of this Christian college? Or are you Clint Eastwood? Because, buddy, I'm about to make your day." So they didn't know what to do with me. And so, anyway, I know that makes me look really bad. It's never been a real public story, but they didn't know what to do. They decided they couldn't kick me out of college, so just put me on probation the rest of the time I was there. And, of course, I changed. Over time, but
4 years of probation.
God reached down and found me and pulled me up out of the muck and mire and helped shape me a little bit different. Just took a few years, but anyway.
I like that story a lot.
Well, there's a few, but so on your songs, it's not just the Christian world that you would talk about. You talked about like things in culture. We don't need no color code, which I love because I'm in an interracial marriage, so of course I love that. And,
right.
And I blew up the clinic real good, which I immediately got because I watched SCTV, and you had those guys blow them up, made the Lord blow you up real good, right? So I knew what that was coming from.
I didn't know that was a thing. So that actually came by accident. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. So then it comes out, and how do you manage or balance your art and your audience reception with this writing?
Well, I didn't always get it right, but I had some older friends who I trusted, and I would usually run the lyrics by somebody else who I thought had good taste and good wisdom. And a few times they would say, "No, you don't want to do that." They would never say, "Don't do the song," but they would maybe give me some advice that was really helpful, and I think it saved me a couple of times from doing something. And not that I haven't done plenty of stupid things in lyrics, but maybe
dude,
saved me from doing even stupider things.
I don't take it as stupid at all. I take it as, in this day and age, you would have been hailed as more of a genius, because you got all the freedom of technology, and we could talk about that all day long with the things that you used to do. If you could have done them in this day, it'd been a whole different world. You wouldn't have had the gatekeepers. You can go directly to your audience and not have to go through gatekeepers like, bookstores, CBA, and all of that stuff like you had to do back then. And I think where it started to change for me, I was a huge fan of I Predict 1990. I loved that album artwork. I thought it was so innovative. And was it your wife?
It was my wife that did it,
Yeah, and as an art fan, I mean, it reminded me of like 15th century stained glass windows, like Philip the Fair and things like that.
Wow.
But what did the bookstores take that as?
Yeah, they thought it was a tarot card, and it really wasn't. It was my wife had got inspired by Viennese poster art at the turn of the last century, but man, once they decided it was a tarot card, it was like the word spread, and it took a lot to convince people that it was not. And some believed me, and some didn't. But it was never meant to be a tarot card.
Yeah, and I remember you were having to call bookstores yourself about the cover and the song "I Blew Up the Clinic Real Good." But such a massive album.
I was
lyrically, it's a masterpiece. And
right.
Of course, it's hard to find now.
Right. I told some of the stores that I would call, I remember talking to one older gentleman in particular. He said, well, you got this song called I Blew Up the Clinic Real Good, and I don't think that's a good thing. And I was like, well, if that's what you thought the song was about, good for you for saying we're not going to carry it. I said, but no, it's a satirical song saying that the ends don't justify the means. But I said, good for you for acting on your convictions. But no, that's not what the song's about.
And let's roll into, there's so much to cover about you in such a short period of time, for sure. But then you go into Squint Entertainment, and you have the album that came out that had Bannerman on that, and then you were producing things for other artists. Let's talk about those. Of course, the most prominent that everybody knows was Sixpence. So yes, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Sixpence had approached me to produce their next album, and I really loved the band, and so we started going to work. And then their label went bankrupt; they were on an independent label, and then a new lawyer took over, and he was kind of a monster. And so I told the band was ready to break up. I said, "Let's make this album. We're going to get this done, and we're going to worry about everything else later." And so I funded the album on credit cards, and then we were able to extricate ourselves from their really bad deal. And they didn't trust anybody, so they asked me to start a record label to put the album out, and that's what happened. And long story short, it turned into a big worldwide pop hit. I tell people, if you've never heard "Kiss Me," you were either raised by Amish parents or you've never shopped at TJ Maxx, because otherwise, how could you miss that song?
Oh yeah, it was in movies. It was on a Song of the Year, and then you had Chevelle. You also had Burlap to Cashmere on that label.
Right.
Both bands were doing really well at the time. That's around the time of our first meeting, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So I was on. I was the first to bring reality TV to the Dove Awards. We were going to film at the Grammys. We decided to film at the Dove Awards, so nobody knew what it was. It was for the Learning Channel, which became TLC, and they brought us there in a limousine, and they had 2 cameras shooting us the entire time, and we were getting out of the limousine. Michael W. Smith was trying to peek in the window, see, who was there, because, nobody had ever seen it. This is new to that part of the world.
Right.
And so, anyway, we get out, we go in. We've been filming since 5 a.m., and you know how you don't get to eat before you go there, because everybody's rushed. You got to get in your dress and everything and get there. I'm there. I have ADD from the pits of hell, and I'm trying to sit through that, and I'm hungry. So I wait for a commercial break, I think it was, and I sneak out the doors. And I walk out, and I'm like, what am I going to do to eat? I walk out, you're standing there outside the building, and I remember, wow, he's pretty tall. But you stand there, and you look at me, you said something like, you hungry too, or something like that? And I was like, Yeah, yeah. There's a pizza place right over here. So you knew I guess it was a mall or something next door to it or something.
Right.
And that was the first
Yes.
time that I ever met you, was because of my ADD and being hungry.
Well, I can relate on all those counts. So yes, I would need to find food too. And yeah, that's one thing I'm pretty good for, is helping people find food.
Well, when you were dealing with the other artists, you started producing these music videos. And
Right.
who are some that we would know from the Christian world and the general market?
Yes. Well, I did Kiss Me for Sixpence. I did Newsboys' Shine video. I worked with,
Great video.
oh man, Margaret Becker and Out of the Gray and Rich Mullins, Guardian. Music videos were a blast back then, because budgets weren't big, but they weren't tiny, and it was just a way to experiment and try different things. And yeah, I have looked back on making music videos with great fondness.
When I was talking about being a velociraptor, you're this guy. You always get a title like executive producer or producer, but you're this
Right.
guy that figures out, how can we get the money for this? How can we structure this?
Right.
How can we put? Most artists don't have that. You're definitely right and left-brained with this, and even to the point, like, this is when I had thought you had gone away, and then I started to see stuff like that you were making movies. I saw that through Hollingsworth, Mark Hollingsworth, because him.
Oh yeah, of course.
Him, Norman, and Ken Cragen were my idols when I was an artist manager.
Wow, right.
Those were the guys. So I saw that you had become involved in the movie production thing, which we're going to talk about after our commercial. But before that, I want to talk about, you even helped an icon in this industry, Russ Taff, who's a vocal influence on everybody. And you did this great project for him. And I know this is not part of maybe necessarily you, but I would like to talk about that. Tell us a little bit about that so people know.
Yes, well, I love Russ Taff, and when the band that brought me to Nashville 35 years ago was a mainstream rock band, Chagall Guevara, that
I was going to get into them
caused
too.
me to relocate. Right. And anyway, we did a reunion show, and then we told people who had bought a special ticket and paid an inordinately large amount of money for that ticket that they could come to an after party the next night, and we'd have some special guests. And Russ was one of the guests, and he sang a version of Down in the Lowlands that just brought the house down. And I'd always been an admirer of Russ, but I could just assume that he, as not that he'd gotten older, that he probably didn't have the same vocal chops, and he just had so much soul that afterwards I was like, he needs to make an album that sounds like that. And so we ended up being able to make it.
Oh, it's iconic. It's just like when Johnny Cash, did the album with Hurt.
Yes.
And all that. It reminds me of a lot of that kind of thing. Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, when we come back, I want to talk about not just your music. I want to go into Chagall when we come back, but we'll go into the movie part of it. Because again, this is a recent thing for me in the past couple of months that I found out you're even doing this. And with your, I knew you had skills for stuff of those type of things, but it's like what you touch is real art. And you've been able to translate that into movies. It's different to make a music video, which is, this long, and then all of a sudden you got to tell a story for an hour and a half to 2 hours on screen. So I would like to definitely delve into that journey and even get into the technology of that. So if you'll stick around, as I told you, we're going to run to these commercials. It will be eternal darkness for you over there until we bring you back in. But stick around. I promise everybody it will be worth it. And we'll be right back once we hear from our sponsors.
Happy Hollows Eve, all you are Beats bangers. It is me, Delta Sigma. Part of the DJ World Beats experience, coming to you on location. From the No-Tell Motel Masquerade and Halloween Party, tossing the candy back and forth with our favorite host, Annalise Pearl, along with house jam band Greasy Keys. Check it out as we slay the sleeper hits on location in the rbeats.com Monster Mansion. You are in for a real tasty treat on the October Trending Show, brought to you by rbeats.com. and DJ World Beats right here on the R Beats Radio Media and Streaming Network. Take it away, Annalise.
Welcome back to another spooky segment of What's Trending Now on R Beats Radio Media and Streaming Network. Take it away, Greasy. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And now let's get started on our upcoming local, national, and international concerts. Starting off with Marcus Anderson, a Grammy-nominated jazz fusion saxophonist who will be performing at Middle Sea Jazz Club on Saturday, October 25th. Doors open at 5:15 p.m. You can get your tickets at middleseajazz.com. Greasy.
Yo!
Who's a Grammy-nominated artist who you'd love to meet one day?
My dream has always been to meet the Queen Bee herself, Beyonce.
Oh, we love Queen Bee in this household.
That's right. Thank you, Annalise. You must check out Middle Sea Jazz Club with John Splithoff for the Far From Here tour.
Taking place on Wednesday, October 29th. Doors open at 5:30 p.m.
Greasy, have you been to Middle Sea Jazz before?
Been there several times. It's going to be a great night, so make sure to get your tickets for that show.
We love the energy. Charlotte's annual Confluence Carolinas is hosting a kickoff party at Amos South End on Wednesday, October 8th, featuring performances from Joe May and Time Sawyer. Doors open at 7 p.m. You can get your tickets at confluencecarolinas.com. Greasy.
Yo!
Where's the place in South End that people need to check out?
Next time you're in South Bend, check out Monday Night Brewing. They have cold beer and live music. It's a great place.
Music to my ears. This is Annalise Pearl and Greasy Keys bring you all the new details and the latest trending watercore conversations. Stay on top of the RBeats app and RBeats.com, always bringing you the best of the best independent national and international music artists. Constant influences are on the RBeats app. You all know the drill. Now let's get started with this week's DJ World Beats top trending songs. Spinning now on 25.8, 366 or global pop stream. DJ World Beats brings you Afterbody by Jay Stevens.
Bruises brings you their new track, Corrida Amolia. And secondly from Bruises, we have F My Ex.
Trending now on RBeats Radio, our house and EDM stream, we have Loneliness by Tom Kraft.
Yes, Annalise. Rolling right along on RBeats Radio is Rave Till My Grave by Hardwell and Maddox featuring Villain. Now we have Ellen Allien, Under the Ocean. Slaying their new sleeper hit, we have Masuma and Dosamus with Contesto on RBeats Radio. Now let's take a journey together on the RBeats Backflip Lounge with Italian artist ATLXS bringing you the hit Passo Bem Salto, along with Azimos hit Let Her Go. Hip hop is our heart on We Global Radio, starting with Baby Sham, Stephen Marley, Damian Jr. Gong Marley, blowing it up with Hustling in My Blood. Next we have Masika with their hit Old Topic, Ayola bringing you Homie, Luis Enriquez, Netin Vega, Furza Regida with Chula Vent, Frisco, Omi 1, featuring JME, Flodan and Jaya Had a Dream. And lastly, Bugsy Malone with Let's Go Back featuring Kelly.
And we have closing out on USA Heroes, our classic rock and country station, we have Moneybag Yo by Whiskey Whiskey featuring Morgan Wallen. And that concludes this week's countdown. Be sure to check out our social media sensation show, What's Trending Now, and be sure to check out RBTZ TV on YouTube and the watch list with Greasy Keys. That's all for now. Take it away, Greasy. Thank y'all for watching.
We're very honored to be here today and to form a partnership with Michael and bringing an American Hockey League team to Charlotte. We really feel that this is a huge step forward to the growth of hockey in North Carolina and in the South.
This is my new home.
They score again. Sorla. It's the hat trick.
And Elkovic for the empty net. He scores! The longest game in American Hockey League history, and we are in the midst of it. Rebound chance. St. Patrick. They're going to the Calder Cup Finals. The Charlotte Checkers are Calder Cup champions. They are the kings of the American Hockey League, and there's no one left to beat. Lorentz can win the game. Fake shoots!
It's been 590 days since the last hockey game in Charlotte, and the Checkers will don a new affiliate on their sweaters and a familiar face as their new captain.
Nash out front, dangling. Shot, he scored! Checkers with it, rebound. Carlson buries it. We're back tomorrow night. On the right wing board, Samoskevich finds some ice shot. He scores, and the Checkers have their first lead of the Queen City Outdoor Classic. Number 124 for number 21, the new franchise record.
And we're back. Steve, are you back with me?
I am back. Yes.
Long time no see. But they were great commercials. So for our people, it was definitely worth the wait. But I brought you back from Eternal Darkness because you're just seeing a pitch black screen. So we're back here with Steve Taylor, and Steve was, as we were discussing earlier, was just known for great art, great lyrics, controversial album covers that weren't that controversial, but it just seemed they were making. I remember when I was showing your stuff and I was showing "Not of This World" by Petra to my youth leader, she was saying, "Well, I like album covers with Jesus on them," and I'm like, "Who has?" Not even the Rambos, back then. Everybody had their group, on it. If Jesus was on there, I guess it was like "Where's Waldo" or something. You had to, find
Right.
where it was going to be in the album cover. But you, I wouldn't say you took a break, but you went a little bit more general market path with a group called Chagall Guevara. Well, you pronounce that way better than I can.
You did a good job.
Guevara. Did I? Okay.
That was you nailed it.
And it basically stood for kind of revolutionary art. Can you explain that project? Because that was a great project. Well, and you had a couple.
I was working with some friends. Dave Perkins had produced
Legend.
an I Predict 1990 album with me, and then Lynn Nichols was actually my A&R guy. And we talked about what if we started a band, and the goal was to get signed to a mainstream label. And Dave and our drummer lived in Nashville. Lynn and I lived in Los Angeles. We decided to move to Nashville. And that'd be a better place to start the band, cheaper cost of living, and you could tour a lot more cities in the region. And then our bass player Wade Janes joined us in Nashville as well. And we got signed to MCA fairly quickly, not quite as fast as the first time
that's your
I got
history,
signed.
though. Yeah, that's how it works for you.
Yes. And, we made what we thought was a really good album and worked with a great producer, Matt Wallace, to make it. It just didn't go the way we hoped it would. But as unsuccessful as we were still more successful than all of MCA's other unsuccessful rock bands. And so they wanted us to do a second album, and we did not want to be with MCA any longer. And so that began like a year-long standoff where we couldn't write or record anything because MCA would own it, and they weren't going to let us out of our deal. And we finally got it settled after a year of wrangling. But at that point, the band was exhausted and broke up.
But you finally finished that next project, and you got it crowdfunded.
We did.
Because that's the Velociraptor that you are.
Yes, 30 years later, 30 plus years later, but, don't want to rush these things.
Sometimes it takes a while to look for that hole in the fence, but the point is,
That's right.
That's pretty inspiring that you'll keep trying there. But I love the way that you guys came up with the name. Now, back then, I thought it was Latin or something. I didn't know. I was a teenager. I wasn't
Yes.
even a teenager. I was older than a teenager, but I was, still young, and I didn't know a lot of stuff. But I love how the band, came up with the name. So can you tell us that as well?
Yeah, it was an oddball name for sure, but we were all fans of Marc Chagall, the painter, and so Dave had the idea of Chagall Guevara, which was combined a artist with a revolutionary
The icon.
figure, Che Guevara, right? And so we liked the name. It sounded kind of cool. We liked the way it sounded when you said it, but it was definitely a hurdle for a lot of people to get over a band with a name like that.
Again, it wouldn't be today, but it was back
Probably
then.
not.
Yeah,
Right,
well,
yes.
you have so many different things at your disposal today that back then it was comfortable. You in the Christian world, for instance, you went to Estes Park, you went to GMA Week, you went to CBA, you went to what is the religious broadcasters one. NRB,
the NRB,
yeah.
I think.
So
yeah.
you went to these kind of things and you showcased, and you had the Dove Awards. You had the great week that ended with the Dove Awards, in Nashville, and it was
Right.
you got a booking agent, you got a record deal. It's just the way it went, and it was a lot easier. Now you have, I feel, way more opportunity, and you can go direct to fans, and there's so much technology, and I'm proud to know so many of those people that are creating a lot of that right now.
Right.
But I still felt comfortable. I felt more comfortable, in the old days, and have to be, stretching out here. But it's like you were saying there, with MCA and creating that album, it may not have turned into what you wanted, but surely it turned into maybe some connections. It turned into some visibility that you wouldn't have had, without that, and it helped you in some of the other areas that you have. Always look for those things, when
Right.
something goes crazy like that. So did you pinpoint any that happened for you through that?
I think we felt we were, because MCA was one of a number of labels that were offering us deals. And so just the fact of getting signed to a label in those circumstances felt like a affirmation. When you're in Christian music, there's, at least for me, there was just something in the back of my mind thinking, could I function at a different level? And one of the reasons I retired from Christian music was it just felt like the labels were deciding to gear more specifically toward a church audience, which
They were
nothing
back
against
then,
that. I
yes.
just wasn't interested in it. Right. And so that's when I decided to retire, and that's when the opportunity came up to form the band. And it's a very different system. It's a different world. It's got its own kind of quirks. I didn't particularly like it better than when I had been in Christian music. I felt, in general, the people that I had dealt with in the Christian music industry were, in general, more honest. That's not
good
always
to
the
hear.
case, but it was just a different experience, and it was a good one. And in some ways, it kind of prepared me for starting a label and, helping get Sixpence worldwide notice, is because I felt like I'd learned some things
You
in
navigate.
that process.
Right.
Yeah, right.
It's like in anything we go into, I always say it on here, your first thing is not a masterpiece, but without that first thing, you don't realize that masterpiece. And
Right.
it's not just in one thing. When you go to different disciplines like you're doing, each time you step into that, new area, new arena, you're doing that again. But you have some
Yes.
experiences that have helped you navigate. Let's talk about your film. Because when I learned this, and I also learned that you did Blue Like Jazz, I'd heard so much about that film. I'm a Donald Passman fan. I read all of his coaching
right.
books, and I love Story Brand, and he has his
Right.
business book, and this guy's he's the man. I'm on his email list as well, and with that, you did his first book to film, maybe his only book to film. I'm not sure.
Yes, I believe so. Don Miller had written this memoir.
I'm sorry, I said Donald Passman. That's how to be your own booking, and that's how everything you need to know about the music industry. Donald Miller is
Right.
Story Brand.
Yes.
Yeah, I just had the wrong thing in my head.
Yeah. And at that point, Don had not started his, kind of marketing businesses. He had just written this memoir about him growing up in a very conservative Southern Baptist environment in Houston, and then he moved to Portland and got a place near Reed College in Portland, Oregon, which the Princeton Review called the most godless campus in America. And he decided to audit classes there. And the one thing that was uncool about, above all other things that were uncool, was to be a Christian in that environment. But he ended up finding some other Christians at Reed College who were afraid to come out of the closet. And so he writes about that experience, and it resonated with me because I had, grown up in a pretty conservative environment and then gone to a really radical campus. And so I thought, I know how to tell this story. And Don was gracious to let me turn his book into a movie, and he worked on the screenplay with me, and we had a good experience, and we've remained friends ever since.
Well, let's talk about your brand new film, which I have wanted to see, and I'm going to, but I have to wait for my wife to come back in the country because my wife is very involved in the arts, and this one's about a young aspiring child artist who causes some things to go awry. So we want to see this together, but I've read everything I could on it, and which I had to spoil, some things for myself in order to do this. And of course, watched every trailer, watched every clip, that I could find. Massively good movie. And the concept and the idea. So this movie is called Sketch. It's put out by Angel Studios, and Angel Studios has become a powerhouse. And I got to say publicly, I cannot believe Cabrini was not in the Oscar race, because that qualifies with everything as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
But Sketch is described as a fantasy comedy about drawings come to life, and kind of like imagine your sketchbook, becomes real. And so how did you find out about this? What drew you to this? And how did you become involved as a producer?
Yes, the writer-director Seth Worley had been a longtime friend that I'd worked with over the last 20 years, and first met him when he was an aspiring filmmaker at age 19.
Wow.
And we hit it off, and he started writing the script for this movie, 8 years ago. I think he'd sent me the first act of the first draft 8 years ago. I thought it was great, gave him a few notes, but he ended up moving to Hollywood. A big producer really liked the project and took it out to Hollywood Studios for a pretty hefty price tag, relatively speaking, and nobody was interested in making it. So eventually he just kind of gave up and moved back to Nashville, where he grew up. And I was talking to him. I was getting ready to go to Taiwan to film a different movie, and just asked him what was up with Sketch, and he said, it's dead. I said, no way, it's too good. He said, no, nobody wants to make it. I said, well, give me the latest version of the script. And I read it in Taiwan, and when I got back, I got with Seth. I said, we could make this movie, but we got to stop asking permission. I love your example of the Velociraptor, because Seth had so many abilities on his own and was so good at visual effects, which is really heavy on, that I said, we don't need $30 million or $25 million. Let's make it for a couple $1 million. And he's like, well, if you can find the money, and I'm terrible at raising money, but in 2 weeks I had two different
I would never know that,
because
you've raised so much for different projects, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's not my favorite thing to do by any means, but so we were able to make the movie, and he did a great job on it. The visual effects took quite a bit longer than I was planning on, but and then the movie
massively good.
Yeah, and it premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, which was the film festival we wanted to be at. And it got a great response. And we thought, based on what our agents were saying, that we were going to have a deal before we checked out of our hotel, because some of the bigger independent studios, we heard that A24 and Neon were both really into it, and we thought there was going to be a bidding war. And then nothing happened. It just kept dragging on, and the studios said, we love the movie. Too. Right, yeah. They all said they loved it, but they just weren't sure how to market it. And it's an original movie, which it's really hard to get anything original made, especially in the family space. And it's not animated, which also was a strike against it. And so after 4 months, we still didn't have a deal. And that's when I called Angel, and they had contacted us during Toronto, and I just was pretty sure none of our team would be interested in Angels. So I just forwarded it to our agents, and they didn't respond back. Anyway, I called their head of acquisitions, said, you still want to see the movie? He said, yeah. I sent him a link, and he got back to me 48 hours later, said, man, I showed this to our team. We really want to do this movie. And so we made a deal, and they were great. They were really aggressive in marketing it. It came out in the late summer. It's actually coming out in the UK today. And, it's not been a blockbuster, but it's done really well for an independent movie. And so we've been really happy with the results. And
the crazy thing was,
for a long time, what's that?
Go ahead. I'll tell you in a minute.
Well, I was going to say the crazy thing was for a long time, it was actually at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. A few reviewers out of, I think a couple hundred decided they didn't like it so much, but it's still up to like 95%.
It's 95,
so it's critically acclaimed.
Yeah, it came out originally at 100, and it's gone to 95. But it's that high on everything that reviews it,
right?
And they're saying things about it like it's a Spielberg-esque. That's one of the quotes that I saw about it, and it talks about the young girl that plays in it. Is it Bianca Bell? Did I have that right?
Bianca Bell, yeah, she's so good.
They're talking about the depth of an actress for being a young child like that. And so she's getting, and the cast in general, of course, is getting great reviews. So you made that happen, but you're talking about the box office, and it's so weird right now because A24, you're talking about them. They put out The Smashing Machine with The Rock, and great commercials. They never have huge movies like that. It's also an independent crowd and independent numbers. I don't know if people thought because Dwayne Johnson was in it, if it was going to do that. I never thought that. I love independent films, so I go see these kind of things. And I think it opened at 8 million or something like that. I'm not sure the exact figure. Even the one from Paul Thomas Anderson, everybody, that's right. I mean, my favorite Daniel Day-Lewis movies are with him. This guy just has a cool look and a strength and a depth of that. I could watch those scenes over and over with Daniel in those movies. But his movie came out, and it was the talk of the town, the Oscar talk. It's going to be everything, and it didn't open strong. And I wonder if it's just because of, we're in this day of streaming, and even when they put something in the box office now, it has such a short shelf life. And being a movie fan, I look at it and I see that it used to be when a movie came out, you talked about it for months. Then this technology came along. You talk about it for weeks. Now it's seems like hours. Sometimes, and then it hits streaming and finds a different life. And streaming, connects all of a sudden to merch and all the stuff that comes out with that, and sequels and everything that happens through streaming. Any take on that?
Yeah, it's just hard to get people's attention enough to go to a theater and sit down and watch a movie. And it's especially hard if it's an original movie. That's why we see so many sequels and remakes and movies based on other existing intellectual property. I'm hoping it'll change eventually. So, we live in hope, but it's a crazy time in the movie business right now.
So with the technology, what are some new things that you think help promote a movie compared to how it used to be? Because I know in the music industry you have so many things when it comes to technology that help get you directly to the fan.
Right. There's all the ways to promote things on social media, but there's also so much noise on social media, and the process is always changing. Sketch will become a beloved family classic. It gets on a big streaming platform, which will probably happen, I think, next month.
Oh, yeah, and the trailer's such great quality that everybody immediately is paying attention to that. I heard everybody talking about it. Then I found out you were involved. It's like, I got to call Mark. We got to figure out a way to get a hold of Steve.
Right.
And, because I was such a fan of what he did in the music. And another thing, being a preacher's son and having to sit through so many of those early faith-based movies, God help us all. I know they were pioneers, but it was always the same thing. And, I knew on Wednesday night when they set up the projector that I was going to try my best to stay awake, and it was that kind of thing. And then, of course, the Kendrick brothers, I got to give them credit for starting a bigger interest, in the Christian movies. But then when Angel came along, the stuff that they were putting out was, that was attention-getting. And I think it changed a lot of the faith-based movie industry. So it's good to see this come out through that, because to me, they're like an A24. They may be more on the faith-based side, but they're picking great scripts and great movies, come out, and the performances are so much, better than they used to be. And of course, I
Yes.
challenge you guys to come to our base in Charlotte because we have some great acting schools down here. A lot of films get made. There's probably 5 that are out right now from studios that were made here.
Wow.
Including like Roof
Yeah.
Man with Channing Tatum that was here.
Oh, yeah, I've heard
Christie
that's
was
great.
filmed here. Yeah, there's a lot
Wow.
that are filmed here. And of course, a lot of Netflix and Amazon shows like Hunting Wives is filmed here. In
Oh,
the
no,
area.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and we have, like I said, great acting schools, great locations, and our red tape is a lot different than probably what some of these people are dealing with in their cities, and the crews. I mean, I've worked on a few movies back with, some of the same crews that I worked with on movies from MGM, probably in the 90s or so, maybe 2000s. Those people are still on the cruise, and they're still, working with the Film Commission and all that. So it's a great place to have stuff come down here. But I'm really glad that you're involved because you, like I said, you are truly a velociraptor. There are just not many. People give up, it's that whole, what is it, 3 feet from gold or whatever that book was, where about the miner that's almost there. There's like this much space left before he gets to the gold, and he gives up and walks away, and somebody else buys the field, and they find the gold. I see that happen so much. I haven't seen that in your career because
I like the analogy because Sketch we describe as a cross between Inside Out and Jurassic Park. So I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, and I do believe that this is going to catch on even more in streaming. I think it's going to lead to some great things for you, and I do unbelievably believe that I'll see you on some kind of Oscar nomination for something that you have coming up.
Well,
just because I've seen your record, I know how you work. Like one thing leads to another, and you get opportunities not because you sit there and they just float your way. Other than that record deal from Billy Ray, so I still can't believe that story is actually true. But you are out there. You're constantly networking. You're constantly trying to do something that's innovative, and it does lead to that next thing. And that's something that I like our viewers to be able to see. Because it's the kind of guest that I try to find, whatever dream you have, if it's in politics, if it's in music, if it's in, visual art or whatever it is, writing, whatever it is, you get that first thing done, you get out there among the people, you find ways that you can market it, and you don't take no for an answer. Even if that answer has to take 30 years before you get to your second album, you see those kind of things through. You have closure on that. I think it's pretty inspiring.
Well, thank you, Terry.
So how do they find out more about you?
Yes, I am not very present on social media. I'm only on social media when I've got something I'm selling. But I'm on Instagram. It's Steve Taylor TPF because that's the Perfect Foil was the last band that I had. And
yes,
on
we
Facebook,
didn't even cover
I think
that.
it's
Yeah,
Taylor. Right. Facebook is Steve Taylor Presents, and what's the other one? X is at the Perfect Foil. So I got, I'm on there every once in a while. I'll probably post something about Sketch coming out in England today. So
very cool. And I'll post that on my stuff as well and make sure word gets out there.
Thank you.
But thank you so much for being with us today. It's been pretty amazing.
It's a blast, Terry. Thanks for you. It's nice talking to you.
Well, I knew from just when I got your, I can say this on air, but when I got your reply, you say, "Hey Terry, sorry about the late reply. My email is like the Fire Festival."
That's pretty true.
You had me hooked from that point. So anyway, if you'll stick around, we'll roll our end credits, say goodbye to our crowd, and then I'll come back and say my official goodbye to you. But again, thank you so much for being on, and thank you guys for watching. Once again here in the studios. Tell all your friends about our beats. We're trying to do some innovative things here. We're not really trying, seem to be doing. Great crew here, and we're bringing you the best when it comes to entertainment and aspiring artists and the people that are out there doing things today. So tell your friends, and as always, much love. See you next time.